everyone, and welcome to this special podcast organized by the South Asia Research Institute for Minorities on the occasion of International Justice Day. I am Tasveer Fatima, a research associate at SARIM, and it is my pleasure to host today's discussion. International Justice Day reminds us that justice is not confined with national borders only. It is about protecting human dignity, ensuring accountability, and strengthening the rule of law across the world. At a time when human rights challenges continue to evolve, these conversations are important than ever. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Amit Anand, a distinguished legal academic from India, whose work focuses on international human rights law, gender justice, and culturally embedded forms of violence. Dr. Anand, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, to begin with, could you take us through your journey? What inspired you to dedicate your career to international human rights law?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Like you said, I am Dr. Amit Anand. I am currently an assistant professor of law at St. Joseph's College of Law, Bangalore, India. My academic work mainly focuses on international human rights law, international criminal law, gender justice, caste discrimination, and harmful traditional practices. Now, in terms of the question that you asked about me taking you through my journey into international human rights law essentially began during my legal education at National Law School of India, University, Bangalore. While studying subjects like constitutional law and international law, I became increasingly interested in understanding why some communities continue to experience severe human rights violations despite having strong legal protections on paper. That interest deepened during my master's in human rights law at the University of Reading in the UK, where I studied international humanitarian law and international human rights law from a global perspective. I realized that many of the challenges we face, be it discrimination, armed conflict, gender inequality, they cannot be understood only through domestic law. They require international cooperation and shared legal standards. Uh, Also, my doctoral research at Lancaster University, like you mentioned, focused on violence against women in India. I was looking particularly at practices such as witch hunting, honor killing, and the Devdasi system. So, all of these practices are often viewed as isolated cultural practices, but they actually represent serious violations of internationally recognized human rights. So, essentially, this is how I became interested in human rights and started pursuing uh, important issues within that larger framework.
Right. Thank you so much for taking us briefly through your journey, Mr. I should say Dr. Amit. So, like you mentioned, that your research explores practices such as gender-based violence and witch huntings. So, what do you think? Why is it important for international law to recognize culturally embedded forms of violence?
Like I was saying, be it witch hunting or honor-based abuse or Devdasi system, these practices they are uh, often treated as culturally isolated, but they are not. They are uh, culturally embedded forms of violence. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions is that if a practice has existed for, say, generations, it should automatically be respected as part of culture or tradition. International human rights law takes a different approach from this kind of understanding. It recognizes that culture, although is valuable, but culture can never justify violations of human dignity. Now, practices such as witch hunting or honor based abuse and the Devdasi system, they are not simply cultural traditions, and this is something that I was looking in my PhD as well. They involve violence, discrimination, coercion, systemic inequality. Obviously, most of the victims are often women, children, members of marginalized societies, or economically vulnerable communities. Now, recognizing these practices internationally is important. It's important domestically for many reasons, it's also important internationally because it shifts the conversation from viewing them as part of, say, local custom, tradition, to recognizing them as human rights concerns that deserve global attention. International mechanisms also encourage governments to collect better data, reform laws, strengthen domestic institutions, and support survivors in any manner they can. So, all of this put together uh, uh, kind of sheds light on a very sensitive local issue. But like I said, it's not a local issue. It certainly is a human rights concern. So, uh, yeah.
Right. Absolutely, I agree with you. What do you think that what lessons can developing countries across South Asia, particularly if I talk about India and Pakistan, learn from international justice mechanisms?
So, international justice is more of a broader term. I would say that in reality, many international human rights standards they reflect universal principles of equality, which I feel essentially forms a very fundamental aspect of what is international justice, or rather, how I understand it. Now, in South Asia, especially India and Pakistan, they have had a very similar sort of uh, cultural background. Uh, and if we talk about India and Pakistan, or rather the governments in contemporary times, they both have made important commitments through international treaties and conventions and have their own domestic constitutions that recognize fundamental rights, which essentially, again, are principles of say they sort of enshrine human rights principles within them, again forming part of that larger framework of international justice. In terms of an important lesson, I would say that accountability again is something that both the governments should essentially look at. They should strengthen institutions so that there is more accountability. Uh, Prevention is always, like I say, is always said to be more effective than punishment. So I would say strong courts, independent human rights institutions, transparent governance, and active civil society organizations, and supporting them uh, can reduce the likelihood of serious violations occurring in both the countries. Uh, International mechanisms also demonstrate the importance of protecting minorities, promoting gender equality, combating discrimination, and ensuring access to justice for vulnerable communities. So, overall, in terms of, I would say that obviously we know that no country in the world has a perfect human rights record. So even sort of well-established countries with functioning democracies, they continue to face challenges, and this is also true for both India and Pakistan. So I would say that international justice should therefore be seen as an ongoing process of improvement rather than a system that just blatantly divide countries into good or bad. So again, I would just come back to the point on accountability uh, in terms of actions and strengthening institutions so that it's easier for victims or survivors to access justice.
Absolutely, Dr. Amit. Talking about the government, do you believe that there is still a gap that exists between the making of laws and the actual implementation of international justice? Like, do you believe there is still a room for improvement?
Yes, certainly. I mean, like I was saying, I mean, even countries that have very good constitutions, be it written or unwritten, most of what provisions they contain are essentially replications of principles of international law or sort of uh, principles of human rights enshrined in them. And through domestication, they then protect the rights of the citizens in within their jurisdiction. But it's not enough to just have rights or rather legal provisions protecting rights on paper, but it's also important that they are actively implemented and also protected uh, in terms of the fact that uh, governments or any other body should not engage in diminishing existing laws that protect vulnerable societies, and also strengthen laws. So, in a sense, that bring in more laws where it's necessary, so that access to justice becomes easier. In terms of implementation, obviously, it's an issue all around the world. Countries might have very good laws, but when it comes to implementation, their track record isn't very good. And South Asian countries are no better when it comes to something like this. Now, obviously, there is no one answer that anyone can give you in terms of how to fix accountability, or rather how to bring in more accountability. But like I said, uh, making sure that there are laws, and making sure that they are not diminished in any way or any manner, and ensuring that there are transparent institutions that work for what they are supposed, for what they are instituted in the first place. If we start looking after all these things initially, perhaps implementation wouldn't be a very big challenge. It might still remain a challenge. There could be other things that might need our attention, but if we start doing all this, then I guess it won't be a problem.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, as we move forward, from your experience as an academic and a researcher, do you believe that scholarly research genuinely makes a difference in the world? It does leave an impact, or it raises a voice for the world.
Uh, Absolutely. I mean, it certainly takes like a longer time, I would say. It doesn't have a very immediate impact. But academic research often provides the guidance upon which international organization or courts, governments, and civil society, for that matter, they build policies. So researchers, they document patterns of abuse, evaluate existing laws, propose reforms, and give voice to communities that are often overlooked. Personally, I have been fortunate to contribute to submissions before various international bodies, including United Nations treaty mechanisms. And these experiences demonstrate that carefully researched evidence can become part of international discussions and influence recommendations made to governments. Now, academic work is not always uh, it doesn't always produce immediate change, as I was saying, but over time it applies, or rather it shapes legal interpretation, public policy, judicial reasoning, and international norms. So in some ways, yes, academic research is important because it sort of lays the foundation for tomorrow's legal reform.
You are right. You are right, Mr. Amit. So, looking at today's rapidly changing world with armed conflicts and humanitarian crises, and we have issues like climate change, where do you believe international justice is facing its greatest test? In which area?
Uh, so I mean, you obviously mentioned that there are these so many challenges that international justice or other international law faces. It's facing at multiple fronts. Armed conflict, I would say, continues to produce humanitarian crisis and mass displacement, like we have seen in the past few years, and obviously we are still seeing now in different parts of the world. Uh, Rising authoritarianism or in some regions places increasing pressure on democratic institutions and civil liberties. Uh, Digital technologies, including AI, they also create entirely new questions about surveillance, misinformation, uh, accountability, right to privacy. Uh, you were mentioning climate change. Yes, of course, it has become a human rights issue because its consequences disproportionately affect vulnerable communities that, uh, you know, and it certainly has a greater negative impact on their lives. The greatest challenge, I would say, however, is maintaining public confidence in existing institutions in sort of international law, uh, and yeah, to strengthen international law ultimately would lie with, again, uh, how willing are countries and institutions to apply legal principles fairly, regardless of power or politics. So I guess, I mean, obviously there are all these multiple interconnected challenges. So yeah, I mean, there are certainly a lot of issues.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you said. And the fact that you cannot just name one challenge or the one test right now, there are multiple challenges for human rights going on. So, finally, many young listeners aspire to work in international law and human rights. What advice would you give to someone hoping to build a career in this field? What skills should they develop? What steps should they follow?
Uh, so, I mean, obviously, international law or any other area within its realm, it requires patience and resilience. Progress when it comes to human rights is often gradual. Uh, it's important to have a foundational understanding, I would say, in law, understanding constitutional law, international law, criminal law, and obviously public international law provides that essential framework to begin with. Uh, Again, what I feel is important, or rather, a second criteria would be uh, to cultivate excellent research and writing skills, because human right work depends heavily on analyzing evidence, preparing reports, and communicating complex issues clearly. Uh, Another thing that I would say is just to be aware of what's happening around the world, because human rights as a body of law, it is so very closely connected with politics, sociology, economics, history, almost everything. So it's important to have a broader mindset, and that would help uh, people to be a better researcher and a bit better advocate for protecting international rights. Also, uh, try and gain practical insights through research projects, through the work of NGOs, closely watching what they do, maybe through internships, uh, just following the work of international organizations. So, more or less, a practical exposure is what I'm hinting towards. Uh, it complements academic learning. So, these are the few things I would say are, some of the necessary things that you need to keep in mind if you're stepping into a career in international human rights.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope that will help in some way to the students. And is there anything or any additional remarks that you would like to add to this conversation?
Uh, I mean, I would just end by saying that international justice is essentially about protecting human dignity. So while we have laws, they alone cannot eliminate injustice. They they help in establishing shared standards that guide societies towards greater accountability, equality, and respect for fundamental rights. But as scholars, practitioners, policymakers, and researchers, we all share a role to, strengthen these institutions and ensure that justice remains accessible to every individual, regardless of their nationality, gender, religion, caste, race, or social status. Yeah, that's pretty much everything that I had to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anand, for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us today. On behalf of the South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, I sincerely thank you and our audience for joining us on this special International Justice Day podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please stay connected with SARIM for more conversations on human rights, peace, and social justice. Thank you so much, Dr. Anand.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.